Did I feel a raindrop? Do you think you could get that umbrella for me? It's a big umbrella. It's a big, friendly umbrella. It likes to help. It likes to spread out its arms wide and give shelter. It loves to gather people in. It doesn't matter if you're wearing some cute gray shoes. It doesn't matter if you're wearing green. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a fanny pack. Or a hat. It doesn't matter if your name is Kevin. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to come up and join us, feel free. Some people worry there won't be enough room under the big umbrella. But the amazing thing is, there is. Thank you, everyone, for joining us under our big umbrella today.
At last, you don't have to hold your arms up so long.
Now we're going to share a video message from the Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, our new president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Sophia's message, welcoming us into a new church year, helps us get to know her and sets the tone for the things that are important for her and the UUA as she begins her 6-year term.
Beloveds, it brings me great joy to welcome you into this season of return, when we celebrate in-gatherings and come back to each other in our congregations and our communities writ large. For me personally, this is a time of return to our Unitarian Universalist Association, and I am humbled by your trust in me as your president. Thank you for the love and support you have shown me, not just during last year's presidential campaign, but during General Assembly in Pittsburgh. Thank you, UUs. We are at the start of our shared ministry together, and we have been invited to consider a whole new way of visioning and resourcing our UUA. Our Commission on Institutional Change has invited us into a type of collaboration that we have not yet fully envisioned. This is work that I cannot do without you, certainly work that I cannot do without our remarkable UUA staff, and I am looking forward to all that we will accomplish together. Beloveds, this is a time to think about and reflect on the call of Unitarian Universalism in these days. Who are we meant to be collectively? And how do we care for one another along the way? In this coming year, once again, we get to lean into our shared values and talk about and discuss and chew on how we express those together as we come back to the next year of work on Article 2. More than just bylaws, however, It matters how we story ourselves into being. Those messages will guide us in our work to come. In this year, we are responding to the call of justice in our nation and around the globe. Beloveds, I know these are difficult times. I know that we are sometimes afraid. I know that we need one another, that there is strength in religious community, and that progressive religious community is called to be a counter-cultural response to what can seem like the inevitable outcome of society today. We believe in human goodness. It is a radical idea. Our liberal tradition guides us toward liberation because we become more free when we are in this work together, when we promote our values together, when we lead together. I want to invite you to sit with me in reflection on all that Unitarian Universalism is called to be in these days. How are you asked? How are you inspired to live your faith in the world? What does your congregation, this community, specialize in? Where is your mission most needed in the surrounding community? And how do we care for one another as we go? Loves, we are called to communal care like never before. We see this in this time when we are re-emerging from the quarantine stage of pandemic. And let me take a moment to say, wow, did we hold one another beautifully and well in these last years. Please let us not lose the lessons we learned about how to hold one another in care, how to protect the health of all, how to center the needs of those most vulnerable among us, so that community writ large continues. What have you learned in these recent years? How are you sharing those learnings with other UUs and with other members of your community? This is the work of communal care as we steward this faith together. Beloveds, I am grateful for each and every one of you. As I said, I cannot do this work alone. This is work we do together. And I cannot do this remarkable ministry without your phenomenal UUA staff. I want to ask you to treat your leaders, leaders of all kinds, religious professionals, lay leaders, elders, youth, emerging adults, all those who shape us in new ways. Hold your leaders with love. We are all tired. Much is asked of us, and there are wonderful things yet to come. Together, we will reimagine the workings and expressions of this faith, and we will hold on to the traditions and theologies and commitments that have made us who we are. This is beloved community. This is communal care in a season of return. I can't wait to continue this ministry with all of you. Be well, beloveds.
It's kind of wild she's so clear there. It's sort of nice. So I'm glad you all got a chance to meet Sophia. As Katie mentioned, it's a 6-year term, so she's going to be around for a while. And I don't know if you could tell, but she's very grounded in Unitarian Universalist theology. She always, every time she speaks, she seems to tap into this root of our theology. I remember I watched her, I can't remember what, it was one of the things during the summer, and she said something like, I believe in grace. But she said it in a way that I was like, oh my God, I believe in grace too. Like, grace is so awesome. So like she throws out these little tidbits that I think can help us all grow and connect with our own spirits. So every year, the Unitarian Universalist Association, we say the UUA, for those of you who are not used to all our acronyms, holds a General Assembly. And this past summer, it was in Pittsburgh, and Kathy Burek, who's a congregant here, and Chad Schneider, who's our commission lay minister, both attended in person. And then a number of us tuned in online. Next year, it's all going to be online, so that's kind of interesting. During the General Assembly, there's business sessions where delegates vote. Sophia was voted on during one of the business sessions. There's workshops, and there's like large-scale worship services, which make me so happy. So if you ever attend with me in person, we will save the front row for you, and we can all be together for large worship. Many of my colleagues and some of the congregants here and in other places were super excited about a workshop this year called Disrupting Church, Creating What's Next. The presenters were Reverend Peggy Clark, who's the senior minister, and Jill Novensky, who's the director of religious education at youth at the Community Church of New York. They challenged us to consider what was, what is, and what will be. What was, what is, and what will be. And I know that many of us want what was to return again. I really understand that. But when really all we have to work with at this point is what is and what will be. So the presenters started with some demographics that paint the picture of what is. They said that 50 years ago, there were 100,000 more Unitarian Universalists than there are today. That's kind of a big gasp of a stat. 10 years ago, there were 52,000 children enrolled in religious education programs, and today there's 34,000. So that's actually 18,000 less kids than 10 years ago. If you imagine, you raised your kids in these churches, that's a big shift. There continues to be an uptick of the nuns that we know, that the non-religious. 45% of the Gen Zs who are oldest are 26 years old. Said that they're not interested in organized religion, and even though many of them believe in God. Our congregations have twice as many people 65 years and older than in the general population. So if you look around our congregation, we are kind of fit a lot of those stats. I know when I hear those stats, I sometimes kind of want to move into this feeling of defeatism. There's like no way over it, can't go around it. So we have to move through it. The presenters talk about our response to crisis, as many of us call this moment, can often make us feel overwhelmed and paralyzed and scared and afraid and resistant and even angry. An article in 21st Century Church gives some perspectives on opportunities when presented with a time of crisis. Crisis, it says, when they happen, give us an opportunity to do better together. Secondly, they say, crisis gives us an opportunity to examine our foundation. When everything's shaking, what holds us firm? And finally, crisis gives us an opportunity to embrace humility. So in October, the Board of Trustees and I will begin the process of strategic planning. How do we, as this community and as Unitarian Universalists, take this time as an invitation to do better together, to understand who we are at our foundation, including our strengths and limitations, and how do we move forward humbly with joy and creativity and experimentation and hope as we build a future together.
I attended that Disrupting Church seminar that Reverend Laura mentioned. There was energy around that discussion that was palpable even on Zoom. It seems there is a yearning to rediscover our place in the world as UU churches, and a recognition that some of our traditional ways of doing church might limit our ability to fully share our gifts beyond our congregations. As I was pondering how we might do church differently and how this might feed into our upcoming strategic planning, I felt I had to go back a step and answer the question once again, why church in the first place? What makes a church congregation different from other communities? Why not just get together with family or friends or my favorite work colleagues? In the words from today's chalice lighting, Hope Johnson talked about being a diverse group of kindred spirits here because we choose to journey together. When we are part of a congregation, I think it's important that at some point we have made a choice to be here or to stay here. I think people feel more connected to chosen communities than those they just happen to belong to. Being part of a congregation should also bring a commitment to grow and change. In the words we use in our own mission, our own MSUS mission statement, we say we challenge one another with loving kindness to be our best selves. We are actively seeking to become people who bring more love, kindness, care, and integrity into the world. Being part of a congregation helps us to live good lives, to make wise, moral decisions in this complicated world. The umbrella in our story for all ages was big enough to provide shelter for everyone. There are many places where I do not show up in all my vulnerability, but here, under this Unitarian Universalist umbrella, under our MSUS umbrella, we want to welcome each other as our whole selves. It's not always easy to offer radical hospitality. In this church, we work at offering this kind of deep and heartfelt welcome. There's a book out called Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life by Dr. Keltner. This emotion of awe has a profoundly positive influence on our well-being. It may not be surprising to hear that church sets us up for awe in multiple ways. Much of church or mosque or temple architecture and visual art inspires awe, as do the music and ritual of religious services. Simply being together, hearing the same message at the same time, or in true UU fashion, participating in a responsive reading together, helps us to feel a common purpose, to feel like we are one. This is a common outcome of feeling awe. It makes sense that a beautiful or awesome environment, whether a cathedral or a mountaintop, inspires awe. But here's something really interesting. The most common source for feeling awe is something called moral beauty. We are moved to awe when we witness things like exceptional acts of courage or extraordinary kindness. Here, in this space that you and I create on Sunday mornings, in this community center room plus Zoom, I am often struck by awe. And this happens when I witness people sharing the tenderest parts of themselves. And then I often see words and acts of kindness as others are touched by this courageous act of being vulnerable. This is, I think, not found in all churches, not even in all UU churches, but it is found here in this church, and my heart is moved every time I witness it. Some of what we get from church, we can certainly get from other communities that we're a part of. And these days, if you want to pick up a new spiritual practice or something of that sort, there's an app for that, or a podcast or a blog. Even we make our sermons available on YouTube. But church offers a unique way of coming together, and these few examples are part of the reason that I continue to make time to join this community on Sunday mornings. And I wonder if disrupting some sort of our usual habits would let us offer these gifts in places and spaces and formats beyond our customary Sunday mornings. Churches, of course, contribute not just to our individual lives, but to society at large. I do want to acknowledge that the words and actions of some churches are harmful. Yet, churches have been and remain a component in the network that provides direct aid to people in need. As a small congregation, we often provide direct service to each other, and we partner with other organizations so that we can be of service to the wider community. And beyond providing a framework for living ethical lives, and being part of a network of support, churches can be countercultural institutions, providing a counterbalancing influence to harmful or extreme trends of society. We are not the first. Look at the roots of Christianity, and we see that the Jesus movement was a voice critical of both the Roman state and many of the norms of Jewish practice at the time. As a countercultural force, we must be serious about living and promoting our values and speak out or take action when ideas opposed to our values become dominating forces. I am, of course, partial to the things that our liberal progressive faith brings to the public square, building up an inclusive society, breaking down white supremacy, being a voice for action in the face of climate change, to name a few. It is important to work to change specific policies and habits as we work toward a more just society, challenging cultural practices not just in the wider world, but within ourselves and in our congregations too. Countercultural power comes from what we choose to support and also from how we go about it. Our opening hymn included these words: "The way we build our attitudes with love or hate, we build a bridge or wall." Our own congregational values, mindful interdependence, authentic curiosity, and courageous love are a counterbalance to today's prevailing cultural story. So many of the messages out there tell us we have to look out for ourselves, to guard and protect what we have, to be afraid. If there is a mention of community, it is often to reinforce walls of division between us and them. The particulars may be different from society to society or from one historical time frame to another, but the story of us versus them is an age-old story. We can offer a counter story, one in which we expand our welcome beyond traditional boundaries. We offer a vision of a world in which we recognize and tend to our interconnections, a world in which our curiosity leads us into real conversations, a world in which we know that awe comes from courageous acts of love and kindness.
Over the years, we've talked about the importance of stories, and Sophia talked about that as well. How do we story ourselves, particularly in this time when we don't know how the story is going to end? We don't even know what the story is going to be in a month. What's the story about who we are today and who we are becoming? It's not that we don't remember the past, but we only have today and the future to work with. So if we are indeed countercultural, which I believe we are, how do we continue to live into that reality? Being part of a faith community plays out within and among and beyond in our own lives, in our shared lives as a community, and how we live out in the world. So how do we lean into the crisis of this time and find energy centered in love and hospitality and justice and joy? How do we feed our spirits together, pay attention to our own spiritual lives, and activate ourselves as agents of engagement and change in the world through joy and love? The image the presenters from the community church offered us was one of a beehive. They used this image as one of community and collaboration, where different people in congregations bring their gifts and focus to relationships with others. A beehive is a community not dependent or independent, but it's interdependent. Small congregations like ours play a role in Unitarian Universalism and the religious landscape at large. We're actually the majority of congregations are these small little congregations like ours, and there's a beauty in smaller congregations. Here, it's the place where most of you have all been attracted to. You came here and stayed because you liked the beauty of a small congregation. Here you can be known, and here you can get to know other people. Here, if you're interested in the choir or the band or serving as a worship leader or preaching, there are opportunities to do so. And I've worked with leaders here who are literally growing their leadership wings, just to keep the little bee metaphor going on, while they are leading a part of the congregation. We, this congregation, has a real place in this progressive faith movement, and I believe we can do more and more if we don't go alone. Don't go it alone. So the city's church staff and actually Sophia, we're talking specifically about sharing resources. And this year we're teaming up with congregations in Mankato and Northfield. We're all going to offer 3 programs this year that aren't like come to Mankato online. It's going to be that this is a collaborative program with the 3 of us. So we'll offer one, Mankato will offer one, Northfield will offer one. Everybody can join online, and if there's enough of a cohort from each congregation, then the small groups will be with your congregation. We're continuing the shared space with Pilgrim House and programming. Both congregations participate in our coffee house and our potlucks and our third Thursdays, and together we're planning a fall harvest festival in November. The Minnesota UU Social Justice Alliance, Moose Jaw, will join us at the Columbia Heights Pride, and our congregation was one of several that joined their booth during the larger Twin Cities Pride this summer. We are creating and living a model of being a hive versus being an independent church with a go-it-alone attitude. So we want this place and people to be a community that you trust, where you can rest your weary spirits, where you can come find communal hope even when hope is really hard to find. It's also a place that asks us to stretch and grow and become better people together. It's a place where we can witness the moral beauty that Katie talked about and feel those moments of awe. So the presenters at the workshop said, if you feel uncomfortable, you've reached the doorstep of opportunity, annoying as that is. If you feel uncomfortable, you have reached the doorstep of opportunity. I'm trying hard to stay in that space of unknown possibility and opportunity, a place that despite the weight of the world, we find reasons to be joyful and compassionate and inspired by love. So how might you and we continue to move into the unknown and be willing to be uncomfortable together? As I mentioned earlier, the board and I have a day of strategic planning scheduled in a few weeks, and from there, you and the rest of the congregation will join us in conversation. So let us enter into this time of possibility, knowing that we are held in communal care and that we don't go it alone. May it be so.